You need to know Governor DeSantis has talked a great deal about this, the different zones that are in Florida. This is a great system they've got because it tells you, should you evacuate? Are you mandatorily obligated to evacuate? Or, might you want to evacuate? And I think many of you will. You go to floridadisaster.org. It'll show you all those zones, because let me put it in perspective. This is your average high tide. High tide happens every day. As you get all of the storm surge in there, it'll rise above this car into the windows and really cause a lot of problems. So that's what we're looking at right now, and we'll continue to keep an eye on things. But again, this is where that storm surge will go thanks to that strong onshore wind, and that's why you need to get out. We'll be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Forward, and that's health insurance.
Little help?
Yeah. Medical bills. I haven't seen one of these in years.
All this virus has us backed up. Time to check in on the old checkups.
Oh, you still charge for checkups?
Oh, not just any checkups. We're talking prescriptions, referrals, blood tests.
We cover all that under one flat fee.
Well, it looks like you've got it all figured out. You deal with it.
Switch to insurance-free healthcare at GoForward.com.
Oh my gosh, you look great. Thanks to you, I lost 22 pounds. And I lost 40 pounds by signing up with Jenny Craig.
Max Up is Jenny's most effective program ever.
I struggled to lose my baby weight and my confidence was at an all-time low. Jenny helped me turn everything around. With her delicious food and personal coaching, the weight came right off. Now I'm looking and feeling like myself again. What are you waiting for? Sign up now. Jenny works.
Spring bottoms have arrived at Fabletics. Go to Fabletics.com and get 2 for $24 bottoms, plus up to 80% off everything else. These new styles are designed to perform and made to stand out. Whether you're out for a run or running errands, we have all the bottoms you need to spring into action this season. From best-selling max compression leggings to performance shorts and ultra-soft joggers, there's something for everyone and every activity at Fabletics.com. Shop now and get your first 2 pairs for just $24.
I'm John Reed.
I'm Diane Reed.
And we've been using Home Chef since 2016. We would eat out a lot.
We would eat out.
At least back before Home Chef. It's unlikely that I would have looked at a menu and picked some of these meals. I enjoyed every one of them.
And once we started on Home Chef, it was kind of fun, so we would do it together and just enjoyed that time.
We set the table and decorate it, with a placemat, and we'll play music and cook together and then enjoy that.
As we track Ian, we have the new advisory just in from the National Hurricane Center. Ian continues to strengthen as those winds, which were 115 miles per hour per the 11 o'clock Eastern advisory, now up to 120 miles per hour. It's over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Very warm waters, of course, continuing to strengthen. Western Cuba did not do much to affect Hurricane Ian. Certainly the structure of the eye, which that diameter of the eye over Cuba was about 22 miles wide. This is a powerful storm. We're also seeing those storms really begin to fire right around the eye wall. Lightning detected within. That's an indication of a strengthening hurricane. It is still the same category. Category 3 hurricane. If we see those winds reach 130 miles per hour, that will put it at a Category 4 hurricane. Again, a strengthening Hurricane Ian with this latest advisory out from the National Hurricane Center. We're also watching that pressure dropping. And right now at the top of the hour on Fox Weather, Hurricane Ian is in the Gulf and beginning its approach to Florida. Some of the damage that we're looking at, those winds in Del Rio, Cuba, ripping off roofs as Ian approaches. Florida, we now have those mandatory evacuations underway for over 300,000 people in Tampa Bay. Those staying are boarding up and loading up on sandbags.
I was like, I'm leaving. I'm like, bye. Like, I found a flight, got the last seat on the plane.
People are nervous. They can't find, my nephew couldn't find plywood. The shelves are totally empty.
We're all pretty level-headed about it as far as just watching it day by day. We know it can turn at any second and take a different direction.
And all day we've seen communities start to board up those homes and businesses like here in Tampa Bay, also in Clearwater. And we're still watching Hurricane Ian. Of course, that newest advisory out from the Hurricane Center, a Category 3 hurricane expected to reach that Cat 4 intensity, perhaps as we head into the evening and early morning hours on Wednesday. Still a lot of time to go before we see that landfall this afternoon. Thanks for watching Fox Weather. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Katie Garner. Stephen, we talked. It even got just a little bit stronger with this new advisory. So it's something we really need to keep an eye on, and we will.
And the peninsula of Florida, not just the immediate coast, under those hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings this afternoon, because we are expecting Ian to make that landfall. It could happen as early as tomorrow, might not happen until Thursday. This storm and hurricane is unique. It's going to slow to a crawl, and that's a big problem.
It's going to slow, and that's a huge problem with all the water, and the storm surge is a huge concern with this particular storm.
Yes, it is. In fact, life-threatening storm surge expected. As we're looking at some of those images, you can see Hurricane Ian from space. This storm is expansive as we're dealing with hurricane-force winds, some 70 miles in diameter from this hurricane. Tropical storm force winds about 280 miles wide. In fact, in the Keys, we've seen those tropical storm force winds. This is still a powerful Category 3 hurricane, a little stronger with this intermediate advisory, and also that pressure continuing to drop. It has already moved over Cuba, made landfall as a major Category 3 hurricane, and it's going to strengthen a little bit more in the Gulf of Mexico. There are still some questions. General trends have shown, though, Hurricane Ian making a landfall somewhere in southwestern Florida, probably close to Tampa Bay, maybe farther south. Tampa Bay certainly not out of the woods, as we could still be dealing with that life-threatening storm surge. This is picking up and churning a lot of Gulf of Mexico ocean water, and that's all going to be pushing in right along that Florida coastline. Really, from the Keys points north, all along that western coast, we're going to deal with the storm surge. This is what we were talking about, with the eye quickly clearing out as it emerged and moving away from the island of Cuba. Look at that lightning. These are real-time indications. These storms are very powerful, and that's that eye wall. This eye protected in a way with those storms continuing to move through. It's a bumpy ride there, certainly with the hurricane hunters moving in, getting that data. All indications, though, show that this hurricane continues to strengthen. We'll have another advisory out from the National Hurricane Center at 5 p.m. Eastern. Key West, the forecast and really the conditions all day have been generally the same. We're talking temperatures not going to budge all that much. Wind gusts, though, have been increasing. Look at that recent gust, 47 miles per hour. Of course, tropical storm force gust, if we see that at 74 or above, it would technically be hurricane force winds. They're sustained at about 30 miles per hour. So we have windy conditions there in Key West and throughout the Florida Keys. How about those wave heights? This is the other thing that we need to watch for. Wave heights, and of course, the amount of water that this is going to push into that Florida coastline, that's going to lead to that storm surge that could be life-threatening. Evacuation orders, heed those. We know that that's important. Category 4 strength as we work into the early morning hours on Wednesday throughout the afternoon. This is going to be something to watch. We're also expecting Hurricane Ian to slow down. As it slows down, we're going to see that rain move over the peninsula, but also that surge will continue to funnel in, especially through bays. Port Charlotte, for example, Tampa Bay, south into Sarasota. All of these coves and the rivers that channel, of course, the rivers typically dump into the bays, but as we get that surge and that strong wind, we're going to see even those rivers swell. Look at this peak storm surge. The threat is there that we could see more than 10 feet worth of storm surge. What would that do to the Fort Myers area? You can see through the immediate area of Fort Myers, that could be devastating for the city. And when we're looking at the threats that Hurricane Ian posed, we don't want to stress one over the other because this is a powerful storm, but storm surge is going to be a big threat. These vulnerable cities along the Florida coastline, even out through the islands, I mean, to see some sort of storm surge where it could exceed 10 foot is not something we've seen in a very long time there through western Florida. Hurricane warnings as well as watches. We have tropical storm warnings also in effect. These hurricane warnings extend as far east, you can see close, not quite to the eastern Florida coast, but certainly farther inland through the Everglades. Hurricane warnings mean we're going to see and feel those hurricane wind gusts. These last until further notice. Also new with the advisory at 11 o'clock, 11 this morning on the East Coast, Miami-Dade included in that tropical storm watch. Also, Katie, up in Jacksonville, we've seen an expansion as now we have indication that Hurricane Ian will likely make that landfall. but continue its slow move over the peninsula in the coming days.
And the slow part of that is the one that we really need to pay attention to. The slower this particular storm moves, the more water it can churn up and the more issues we're going to have with flooding and a lot of that rain. You're looking right now at Miami, and I'm going to tell you what, it's going to get a lot choppier than this as the days progress. We've got a lot to talk about. I want to show you Naples right now, 75 degrees, and yes, it is raining there. Gust at about 23 miles an hour. Now, we aren't so focused, or I guess you shouldn't be so focused on, okay, this is the main point where it's going to make landfall. No, we don't know that yet. So let's focus on the fact that we know that no matter where it goes, where it's projected to go, storm surge, rain, and wind is all going to impact Florida, not just the West Coast, the East Coast, and Central Florida as well, all right? Storm surge will flood two-story homes at the coast. If you have a two-story home at the coast, take heed of this. Widespread power outages are likely with wind gusts. Get this, up to 100 miles an hour. Serious, serious stuff there. So with the power outages, I know Governor DeSantis, I've been watching his press briefings, has said he has thousands upon thousands of crews ready to get that power back on, but it could take a while. This isn't just going to be a day turnaround in recovery from this storm or getting the power back on. It's going to take time to do that. So with this particular storm, again, the path is showing that, yes, Tampa, Tampa Bay, Fort Myers, these areas really going to get hit hard as landfall is likely made in and around this area, likely being the key word. We'll have to wait and see, but the confidence of the track is pretty high right now through Friday, all right? So as we look at Sarasota, we're looking at 8 to 12 inches of rain for you and anywhere from 40 to 75 mile per hour wind gust from Wednesday into Friday morning. The storm surge is going to be anywhere from 5 to 8 feet in this particular area. And what you need to know, ready, set, go, all right? To get ready, you need to make a plan and pay attention to the forecast, which you're doing if you're watching right now, so give yourself a hand. All right, now you need to get set, prepare for potential storm impacts, which I'm sure you're doing as well. We've seen plenty of video of people boarding up their windows, evacuating, taking flights out. It's the best thing you can do is to evacuate and then finalize preparations and again, evacuate if you're told to. Speaking of being told to, Governor DeSantis has also talked a lot about zones. If you're in particular zones, you have to evacuate. Fort Myers, the Ian impacts will be 5 to 8 inches of rain, 40 to 75 mile an hour gusts. Mainly these higher gusts are going to come in on Wednesday, but they will last through Thursday. And Stephen, the storm surge here, 8 to 12 feet.
And talking about those mandatory evacuation zones, let's go to one. Hurricane Ian's impacts, of course, approaching Florida. Time is running out to get ready, and we have team coverage on the ground in the Sunshine State, all over the state, with our correspondents positioned from West Florida all the way into Orlando. We'll start with Fox Weather's Max Gordon this afternoon in St. Petersburg. Speaking of those mandatory evacuations, we spoke to the mayor of Sarasota just last hour, and he was saying, Max, how Floridians, a lot of times they're used to these hurricanes and they might not take this seriously. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, there are those folks who say, no, I'm not going to get out. But a lot of people here in the St. Petersburg, Tampa area have been telling me, yeah, they are going to be taking this seriously. And as sort of the models start to show that this hurricane is going to be a real threat to this area, they're going to be getting out, which is very good. There have been mandatory evacuations issued here in Pinellas County, evacuation zones A, B, C. Also, folks who are living in mobile homes. All these zones and situations, folks have been told to get out of here. Right now, we are in evacuation zone A. This is the most susceptible to storm surge, which is going to be a real issue. So we are expecting that conditions here are going to be deteriorating over the next day or so. Now, all of Florida is under a state of emergency. All 67 counties here. 5,000 Florida National Guard troops have been mobilized, with 2,000 guardsmen from other parts of the country here to help as well. 26 school districts have announced school closures across Florida, and in some cases, schools will be used as shelters. In the Tampa area, food, water, generators, and pumps are all being staged before landfall. Power outages will be likely when this storm hits, and Governor Ron DeSantis says that restoring power is going to be a top priority. Here in Pinellas County, Duke Energy says that they're staging crews and they upgraded their power grid with new technology that reroutes power around problem areas to prevent mass outages. Trees falling into lines, high winds, and floodwaters are all going to be big concerns when Ian hits. And as this storm draws near, people have been scrambling for supplies. Some gas stations have run out of fuel, and drinking water has been snatched off of store shelves. Hardware stores are packed with people buying generators and plywood to board up their homes. And many people told us that after they cover their windows, they are going to get out.
We don't know how it's going to turn and how bad it's going to get. And the flood, I think, the main concern. And we have a huge oak tree next to the house. So if it, it can break the roof, break the house.
And it's good that people like her are going to be heeding those evacuation orders. We have heard from officials that in some areas, even first responders are going to have to get out. So there might not actually be help if you choose to try to ride out this storm. In the meantime, here in the St. Petersburg, Tampa area, roads are starting to get congested as people evacuate. It's a good thing, but be sure to hit the road with plenty of time because there could be some traffic jams out there. And Tampa International Airport is going to be closing at 5 p.m. today. Stephen, back to you.
All right, we'll be watching it pretty carefully. And if you head out of Pinellas County and you go on that 275, that's the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, you'll head down to Manatee County. And Max, we have some breaking news because in Manatee County, we're having a press conference right now. As officials there in Bradenton, Florida, a mandatory evacuation is currently in effect for zones A and B in Manatee County and a voluntary evacuation for zone C. A couple of speakers here, including the county administrator as well as the deputy public safety director. Let's listen in just for a brief moment.
Very good friend of mine. He's called me and we've made sure that we're going to have whatever resources we need quickly into this region, not just with FEMA, but additional resources from the federal government. Power companies are on standby, but it could be a few days before they get to you. We need to be ready. We need to be safe. But as was mentioned earlier, this is a serious storm. People need to take it seriously. And I'm very concerned kind of for the region, but I'm very hopeful. But I don't think if you take a look at the storm in general, he did mention it might come down to Venice, but it's still in the region. It's a big storm, and we've got to do everything to keep everybody safe. But I will assure you, from my standpoint, a federal response in terms of FEMA and appropriators, we will be ready and supportive and do everything we can to get people back safely and quickly once the storm leaves, ideally on Friday or Saturday. Thank you.
And you're hearing from administrative officials there in Manatee County as we are dealing with that evacuation, mandatory evacuations in Manatee County for Zone A and Zone B. That's what we have to watch and pay attention to this afternoon. Now, regarding those winds, this is the component to a storm and to a hurricane that can do a devastating blow to not just a coast, but farther inland, depending on the strength of this hurricane, which we're expecting this to still strengthen. Power outages looking likely, very likely, especially along that immediate coast. Tropical storm force winds, that we would classify as 40 miles per hour or greater. That confidence, nearly 100%. We're going to see that from Tampa down into Fort Myers. Those bays, very prone. Of course, we have the storm surge too, which the wind's responsible for it. It's going to be bad. Cape Coral north, even into Orlando, where we have hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings. Those winds are going to push inland significantly. Looking at where we could see those hurricane force wind gusts, also on the high side. Now it's all about how close to that eye we have the western coast of Florida get to. I think we're going to see the eye cross over, but those hurricane force wind gusts, at least the latest advisory, about 70 miles in diameter. If this storm weakens at just a bit, those winds will expand. We might have the center and those winds weaken at the core, but we get that wind field to expand, and those hurricane force wind gusts could grow larger than that 70-mile diameter as we're dealing with right now. So that's a concerning thing, and why a weakening hurricane is not to be messed with, because that wind field could still be devastating. Hurricane warnings we have now farther inland, as I mentioned in Orlando, a hurricane watch. Also, tropical storm warnings. The entire peninsula of Florida going to feel those winds, even as far away as Miami, where we've seen some greater than 100 miles per hour. If it's north of Fort Myers, same thing. That storm surge going to be significant from Tampa down to Fort Myers, even into Naples. And then, Katie, this moves on shore. We're Thursday morning, though. We're not going to see much movement with this. We have to watch even as it moves inland, like places Orlando, Orlando, one of those cities that you're pretty familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
We've got about 5 to 8 inches of rain or so that we could see be falling. So we got to watch it.
It's wild. I mean, Central Florida, at first, they thought, you know, we knew there was a possibility,
Right.
but a lot of people in Central Florida thought, okay, we're in the clear. But the truth is you're not. Everybody's got to be on high alert. We don't know specifically where this thing is going to make landfall quite yet, but we're on it. And I want to focus really on Fort Myers, Stephen, because a lot of the storm surge, regardless of where it goes, is going to impact like Tampa, Tampa Bay, Fort Myers. You can see the satellite here as to what's happening. And as you look, I mean, you're looking into, you know, today through tomorrow as this storm just churns up, and it is just nasty. I mean, it's going to really bring that storm surge up to 10 feet, believe it or not, okay? So that's what we're looking at right now, and I want to show you firsthand the watches and the warnings. The warnings certainly outnumber the watches here from Cedar Key down to Homestead. You have those storm surge warnings in place, so you know what that tells me? Get out. If you're in this area, you can evacuate, please do it. Again, Governor DeSantis has given you those zones to tell you if you have a mandatory evacuation, but I know you're all smart in Florida. You know how to handle a hurricane, and you know this one is downright dangerous, so get out while you can, okay? Be smart about this because the peak storm surge goes from 3 feet all the way up to 10 feet from Port St. Joe all the way down to Key West, and then even through St. Augustine on the East Coast too, which tells you all of Florida is really gonna be in for it as far as the rain and the storms go. And the other thing, Stephen, I know we've talked about, this storm is gonna slow up likely as it makes landfall.
Okay.
With that, that can deeply contribute to a lot of the flooding and a great deal of that rain too. So as you look here again, we're anywhere from, you know, 9 to 10 feet. Bonita Springs, Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, all the way into Tampa. It's devastating. Tampa, I know if you guys are watching and you're from Tampa, you're like, my gosh, we haven't dealt with anything like this in quite a long time. It's jarring for you, and I understand that, and I really do sympathize with you. It's tough. All right, the storm surge potential, look at this. We go anywhere from 3 feet to over 9 feet, and this is just a really in-depth look at where and who is going to see it. In fact, Herons Glen Golf and Country Club, you are likely to see some of this. Port Charlotte, right down here in Cape Coral. You know, we're even looking at Fort Myers, as we've been talking about, to really see the highest amounts. I cannot even sugarcoat it. It's going to be bad. As you look at this, this is what storm surge is if you're curious. If you're thinking, what in the world is it? That's fine. I'll explain it. You've got this average high tide, okay? And when you have this average high tide, that happens daily. But when you couple it with the strong onshore winds, that's when that water really starts to rise up. And that's when you see it just engulf cars and your homes. And again, that strong onshore wind plays a big part in this. And that's why you need to evacuate. Right now, oh, you know what? Producer John, you're in my ear. We have a tornado warning. John, say where it is one more time. Miami-Dade County and Monroe County, Florida. Tornado warning, Miami-Dade County, Monroe County, Florida. Stephen, these tornado warnings are going to continue to pop up as we progress today, so I wanted to get that in really quick before I give it back to you.
Yeah, it's associated with one of these rain bands. These things are going to carry a multitude of threats, and we need to watch that pretty carefully. And they're in Miami-Dade County. If it's along the eastern coast, of course, that's where most of the people live. In fact, we had one of those tornado warnings that expired at 2 o'clock. I think this one is going until 2:45 now. And yes, that does include, as Katie mentioned, mainland Monroe and Collier County until 2:45. This storm associated with those rain bands. It's these individual storms, though, that we got to watch pretty carefully. Not really organized with one of the main bands, but certainly providing those gusty winds and also the chance of maybe seeing a little bit of rotation. And it's actually quite evident. These tornado warnings and the nature of the type of tornadoes that we could be dealing with here, they're very quick. They might be relatively weak, and that couplet that we're watching, it does appear to be a bit on the weaker side, but you can certainly see it. I think 10 Mile Corner, one of the areas that in the northwesterly direction that the storm is moving in, we'll probably see a crossover. This is a little more rural in parts of southern Florida, but yes, a portion of Miami-Dade County, including Monroe County in Florida, have that tornado warning until 2:45. It was literally just issued a couple of minutes ago. That's going to be the threat. In fact, through South Florida, we have a tornado watch this afternoon, and that tornado watch goes until 5 o'clock Eastern, and it's associated with a couple of those outer bands.
I'm going to, but I'm waiting for the wind speeds. I'm paying really close attention, and I don't want to bring them in too soon. The only thing I really got to take in is I'm gonna, because the way it's looking. Although when I woke up this morning, I was a little bit
have.
freaked
And that does
out
include
because
the city of Miami,
That's like I
as
look
these
like
bands
it's-
move
No, I
on
mean,
through
it
and
still
generally
kinda
push
looks
from the
that way,
south to the
but let me
north,
show you
but also
something.
in
Look
the
at this.
westward direction,
Find this picture.
as those bands are wrapping around the center of Hurricane Ian. That's
So
going
this
to be a
morning,
threat.
when I
As
woke
we're
up,
watching
that was the
tornado
track.
warning, we're also watching
And that's our
how
house.
Hurricane Ian will evolve.
And I was like, holy
We
crap.
expect
And it was only a
continued
category
strengthening
1
throughout the afternoon
when
and
it
the
goes
evening.
over, which
And
is
really,
not very
with this
high.
landfall perhaps
And you really
expected
just
as
need to
early
make sure
as
you don't have any
tomorrow,
loose
we
things
need
laying
to see
around
where
outside.
the
100's
strongest
pretty,
of the
you know,
storm,
like
when
I'm
we
gonna go
talk about
take
the
the sign,
winds,
next
will
door
move
neighbor, the
through.
leasing
Of
sign.
course, we're
I'm
going
gonna
to
take
deal
that
with
dang
storm
sign
surge,
down, lay it flat on
life-threatening
the
storm
back
surge
patio.
from Tampa down
Because
to
if it
Fort
stays out
Myers.
there, it's gonna
This
hit,
is our
it's gonna
Fox
bash
model
into
by
our
about 4
cars.
o'clock.
So I mean, we're gonna have wind, lots of
we're going
wind
to see
and
that
rain.
eye very close to the
I'm
Florida
glad that they're
coastline.
on their way
Evidence
because
really today that we're going to see
it's
this move
yeah,
inland
it's if you
and
look at
push
the
off to
radar
north,
here,
but it's
you
going
can
to be
see
slow.
that
This
it's
is
coming right here.
Essentially,
And
12 hours has passed.
you know, we'll
since
get
we
it
were
and then it'll
watching that
stop
eye.
and then we'll get it
Still
and then
hasn't
it'll
moved
stop
onshore.
and then
There in
it'll be
Tampa,
right on top
we
of
could
us.
see
So
the
we're gonna
most
get it like
intense
4
winds.
times.
If we have a direct hit, it's the first time it's happened
Maybe
in more
even
than
more.
100 years in Tampa.
And
We don't
supposedly,
wanna see that. We also don't
so
wanna see that
they're
flooding,
saying
but
it's the
unfortunately,
slowest,
Katie,
biggest,
we have that
slowest
flood watch, and
storm that
that's
we've
in
ever
direct
experienced in
response
100
to how
years.
slow this hurricane is going to
So-
move. You might be looking at this map seeing 12 to 18 inches. We might exceed that. 20, 30 inches, all about where the heaviest of rain sets up. These storm totals are going to be impressive with Ian.
She is nice.
All right, Stephen, I want to take a live look right now as we continue to track Ian.
You
And
know
on the
why I
actual
haven't kept my
track
hair
of the
up?
storm, you
Stole
can
my
see
hair
it's
back.
still a Category 3. Where
I
exactly
didn't
it will make
steal your hair,
landfall
man.
is still
Stole this
unknown
man
at this
right
particular
here.
time. But
I
we
didn't.
know
I gave it back
Tampa,
to you.
Tampa
I
Bay,
didn't take it
Fort
in my
Myers, and
hairbrush.
surrounding
Someone
areas
stole
such
my
as
hair
Sarasota. This is
man
going
was
to
here.
be
I don't know what anybody's talking
devastating.
about, man.
Yes, I use the word devastating. Stay with me to find out exactly why and
I don't know
what you
what
can
y'all
do
talking
to
about.
stay safe.
You are a good. I was going to tell you that. You know, you are a good partner. There's lots of things that you do really, really, really well. And you know,
I have a tendency to take over things.
but listen. Here's the thing. You got to understand this, okay?
It's your turn to
Stuff
feed the
that's
owl,
going on
honey.
with me,
I always have to feed the owl?
biological, nothing physical. If anything, I feel purer than I ever have before, like in many senses. No, I don't mean like that, but I mean in the sense of like, you know, like being very cognizant every day of sin, right? And so I'm being very, very, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. So anyways, so it's not that. So I don't know, and I'm just thinking, okay, well maybe it's just a little bit older, and then there's some pressure there because then you did tell me that I'm the only one that could do it, and you couldn't do it for yourself, and you know, and it's kind of all up to me. You know, that's a little bit of pressure. That's one. So I don't know if it's that, but that could be part of it. But the second part is, you know, I don't think you're coming into perspective as far as looking at it from my side, as far as manhood is concerned, where 3 times in a row I have some missteps that are pretty bad. It's kind of emasculating for a man, so it's kind of like that's like, okay, so that's part of like what makes me a man is that, and when that's gone, which one day it will be gone, just the hiccup in it
I'm
won't.
giving you some medication.
But the hiccup in it. But see that's what I'm saying. It's stuff like that. That's not encouraging, because that's all about you. So you're not taking a second to think about how it makes me feel. Imagine for
You're not
you.
thinking about how it makes me feel.
Yes, I am. I think about how it makes you feel, but it's not affecting you the way that it's affecting me. It's affecting you in the way that you're having to suffer, like in a different sense. Mine is very at the core of who I am. You're gonna have that same thing happen to you eventually when you can no longer have babies. You know, you're gonna have the same feeling. Now, I don't think this is that it was a lasting thing. I think it was just something at that moment, and it just made me realize, well, look, I'm
during,
how old I
and
am,
after
you know,
the
it's a
storm.
possibility, and then some
Yes,
pressure
we
that's
will
involved
experience
there,
impacts,
and a few other things.
more
So,
than likely
you know,
significant from
I think that
Hurricane
everything
Ian,
else,
and
the
we are
taking
ready to
over and
face
the
them.
over, you know, me
We
seeing
have
you
opened
overstepping
more
and
than
all those other things
45
ties back to
emergency
that kind of
evacuation
emasculation.
shelters.
And so I'm
And
already
so far
feeling
we
very
have
sensitive
more than 600
because,
people in the shelters.
you know, in that
several
sense,
events,
right?
and we expect a dramatic
So every
increase
little
today.
bit,
That makes sense.
it's going
Mandatory
to.
evacuations
love
in
you, and I
order
do
for
wanna try to
several
be a better
counties in the
partner.
Tampa Bay area.
And I should
These
be
were the
nicer
scenes
about
that
it,
we
and I should
saw
probably
on
try to
Monday as
explain it up
folks
front, but
getting
it's
out
hard
of communities
because I
where
try to
those
do it in a nice
evacuations
way.
I did
were
it.
mandatory.
$200,000.
Hillsborough, one of those counties that we just heard from administrators
Cool.
there.
In the game,
Schools
I
in
have.
Hillsborough
I
County
was
also
trying
forced
to raise
close.
$200,000.
Right now, we're actually joined by Addison Davis, the superintendent for
I wish it
Hillsborough
was real.
Public
I'm
Schools.
so extremely
Addison, good
tired.
afternoon to you, and thanks for joining us here on Fox Weather. So, as far as how long these schools are expected to be closed, is there a timetable you have, or is it sort of a wait and see what Ian does?
You know, right now the biggest thing is to be able to watch the trajectory of this hurricane and see how it, continues to impact our community. You know, right now we have 60 shelters that we've activated, not only for evacuees, but also for our first responders. And our administrators, food, nutrition, transportation staff, they're on these sites ready to be able to extend a safety arm to be able to help them, make sure they have a sense of comfort every single day. But we are, our rapid response teams are ready to respond for post-assessment, but it's all about, the duration of this hurricane and how long it will actually hover over the Tampa Bay region.
I feel the pandemic has certainly changed the way that students learn, not just in Florida, but across the country. And when we talk about that option to remote learn, when you have a hurricane approaching,
I don't
perhaps
care,
it's
you
not
can
the
get
best
whatever you want.
strategy. Is there consideration that maybe remote learning will be
That's fine.
instituted?
If you wanna get things,
especially
good
given
luck.
the situation that you guys are dealing with Hurricane Ian?
Good luck.
You know,
But yes,
one thing we know
absolutely.
is the pandemic really
That's what you-
revolutionized education and
If
allowed
that's what
us
you would
to
like to
really
do. I
have
mean, whatever.
different
I mean, get
offerings
whatever
for
you
our
want.
families
I
to
mean,
be able
we're
to
going to be
educate
stuck.
them. However,
Once
in Florida,
once
we no
tonight,
longer have
once
an
the
emergency
stores
order that
close
protects us
tonight,
and allows us to have an opportunity to extend, the remote learning right now during this process. So all this is about instructional hours and times that we have to capture, and that's more of a brick and mortar face-to-face kind of issue. The biggest thing that we would love to be able to transition during this time, but the biggest thing for us is making certain that our families have the essentials to protect themselves, their friends, and their loved ones as they transition and prepare for this storm the same way that we have, Monday through Thursday. Our school districts are closed, and potentially due to the impact, we may be closed as well on Friday. And, learning loss is real through the pandemic. So this is, 5 days potentially out of school will put us back and, exacerbate the achievement gap. But our teachers and our staff and our administrators and support staff, we stand ready to be able to accelerate learning upon their return.
Yeah, those challenges have just been devastating for some schools. In Hillsborough County, the schools are going to serve, as we understand, a few of them as storm shelters. Can you elaborate on that? Zone A in Hillsborough County is under that mandatory evacuation, and perhaps some people don't have loved ones or people that they can go to throughout the state or elsewhere in the country, so some schools will be opened. Is that correct?
That is correct. Right now, we have 45 of our shelters that are open to this community, and these are from shelters that will serve communities that are from in areas that are flood prone, whether they are in mobile homes or they could be potentially homeless, or they just need to be able to come to evacuate somewhere safe. And our shelters are stand up to be able to, for special needs, for general populations, for families, and also for pets as well. So, Hillsborough County EOC has done a really good job partnering with us and our staff as well in order and an effort to be able to provide the essentials during this very stressful time.
And we wish you guys the best of luck. Of course, we'll be watching Hurricane Ian very carefully. Addison Davis, Superintendent of the Hillsborough County Public Schools, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Be safe.
Yeah, thank you so very much.
All right, Katie.
All right, we're continuing to track Hurricane Ian. We'll be tracking it all day. You can see the satellite view of where the storm is right now, where it's tracking, which is right into Florida. The two questions we have are where exactly will it make landfall and who needs to evacuate? I can answer one of those two questions when we come back based on what Governor DeSantis has told us about certain zones, and we're still waiting to determine where exactly this will make landfall. Stay with us. A lot to cover when we come back.
The Wanda card from Credit One Bank bestows points for all my journey's expenses, like rental cars, hotels, flights, feasts.
Get up to 10 times the points on hotels and rental cars when you book through the Credit One Bank Travel Partner. Visit creditonebanktravel.com.
Greetings, travelers. I am Point Stephanie, goddess of points. The Wanda card from Credit One Bank now bestows 10 times the points for rental cars and hotels.
Whoa.
Plus, points for flights, feasts. professional sporting events, theatrical productions, circuses, ski slopes, carnivals, fortune tellers, tarantula petting zoos, wallaby petting zoos.
Get up to 10 times the points on hotels and rental cars when you book through the Credit One Bank Travel Partner. Visit CreditOneBankTravel.com.
Spring bottoms have arrived at Fabletics. Go to Fabletics.com and get 2 for $24 bottoms plus up to 80% off everything else. These new styles are designed to perform and made to stand out. Whether you're out for a run or running errands, we have all the bottoms you need to spring into action this season. From best-selling Max compression leggings to performance shorts and ultra-soft joggers, there's something for everyone and every activity at Fabletics.com. Shop now and get your first 2 pairs for just $24.
With Home Chef,
now I can get
you're
mine.
home free when you're craving a home-cooked meal. Our oven-ready meal kits are easy to make and even easier to love. When it comes to making dinner, fill in the blanks with Home Chef. Delicious, meat simple. Get $90 off when you sign up at homechef.com.
We are back here at the bottom of the hour on Fox Weather, still tracking major Hurricane Ian, now a Category 3 hurricane. In fact, it's remained as a Category 3, even moving over land. Western Cuba, that landfall overnight, and it's going to strengthen, at least that's what the forecast calls for, perhaps into a Category 4 over the next 12 to 24 hours. A landfall, too, looking more and more likely this afternoon. Latest stats with that 2 p.m. advisory out from the National Hurricane Center. Winds are now up to 120 miles an hour. These intermediate advisories, sometimes not much change, but when we see that pressure dropping and also winds increasing, that's a sign that this thing's continuing to deepen and even strengthen. Cat 3, as I mentioned, moving off to the north at about 10 miles an hour. When we were talking about on the 2 p.m. advisory on Monday, I had to take a second glance there. Those winds were just at 85 miles an hour. It was a hurricane and it was strengthening. Boy, what 24 hours will do. Talk about rapid intensification. When those winds increase by 35 miles or more in just a 24-hour period, we have a rapidly intensifying hurricane, and that Category 3 status perhaps not going to be that for long as the pressure has been dropping. Look at this, though, the millibars. Important to note, as we were working into the early morning hours on Tuesday, as that landfall was occurring, we were at the lowest pressure that Ian has been at 952 millibars. Then, at the 11 o'clock advisory, we were back up to 963, and that's because landfall over Cuba happened between that time. And naturally, when a hurricane moves over land, those waters, as we can clearly see now by that well-defined eye, they're not receiving that fuel. So this hurricane was overall weakening. Now it's beginning to strengthen, and anytime within the eye wall we see evidence of lightning, and this is real-time data that we're getting in, this eye wall is secure. This is a healthy storm, and it's moving off to the north at 10 miles per hour. You can see right down into the Gulf of Mexico. So as we work through the next couple of hours, we're going to have to watch to see what occurs. Just incredible. You can almost make out a few of those gravity waves that are pulsing out of that eye. This imagery, the satellite, visible satellite that we have to use this afternoon, just incredible. We don't always get to see it. And then also just the explosive nature of a few of those storms just off. This is the time, and perhaps the strongest, that we will see Hurricane Ian. One thing to note, even if we do see Hurricane Ian weakened a bit, that's going to likely expand this wind field, the wind field of the hurricane force winds, which exceed 74 miles an hour. That power outage has now, at least a widespread threat, pushed inland. And this includes the city of Orlando and Ocala, as we have hurricane watches, not just now on the western coast of Florida, but farther inland through the peninsula. This is a serious situation. This isn't one of those weak hurricanes where people think you can ride out. From Fort Myers to Sarasota into Tampa, this is a major storm. and it could be one of the likes that we've not seen affect this part of the state in quite some time. As we're looking at where those winds, the winds that we're seeing and experiencing from Ian, that wind field a little more compact. I mean, we have hurricane force winds at a diameter of about 70 miles, but that's right through the eye. From the center, tropical storm force winds extend some 140 miles out. So that's a diameter of about 280 if you double it. Looking at where those warnings and watches are, though, this afternoon, the entire peninsula under either a tropical storm watch. That includes Miami, the largest city in Florida. But we also have Tampa, which has remained in the cone, Katie, from the beginning, when that first cone and that first advisory was issued from the National Hurricane Center. So as we're working still on those cameras, we'll leave you with the shot there of all of the warnings that we have. Just an incredible sight to see, and that includes where you live there in Orlando, Katie.
It does, yeah. Speaking of where I live in Orlando, a lot of people, I live in the Lake Nona area of Orlando, a lot of people thought that they would be okay. But the whole time, Stephen, we've kind of known it all depends on where this track goes. But I'll say in Orlando right now, even being the central part of Florida, I've heard firsthand generators are running out. They are now starting to bag the fuel pumps. Water is almost impossible to find. And that's in the central part of Florida. So can you imagine if you don't evacuate on the coast, the West Coast? All right, so there's a lot of evacuation orders in place because devastating storm surge, rain, and winds will impact Florida. There's no question about that. Storm surge will flood two-story homes at the coast. If you have a home at the coast, it's 2 stories. You're looking at that storm surge to become a big problem for it, but I'm sure you have flood insurance. So, all right, widespread power outages likely with wind gusts up to, get this, 100 miles an hour. That's huge. That can kill you if you don't evacuate. I know that's blunt to say, but it is true. And that's why those orders are in place, because as this makes landfall, depending on where it goes, anything can change that track a little bit. But we know, Florida, you're going to be impacted, and the winds are going to be blazing through along with flooding, because as it makes landfall, it looks like the storm could potentially slow down. And as that happens, you're looking at deeper flooding issues, and it's just not going to be good. So we've got the watches and warnings, the tropical storm warnings right over here towards Sebring, Placid Lakes, and LaBelle, and all surrounding areas. And then you've got the hurricane warning for Tampa, St. Petersburg, down through Sarasota, Port Charlotte, Arcadia, Lakeland, down I-4. And so it's just going to be a mess. You know, major roads could flood. Maybe your neighborhood comes out a little bit unscathed. Guess what? Some of those major roads could be absolutely impassable. That's why you need to have your emergency plan in place now. And let me tell you something. If you're anywhere in these areas, Fort Myers up to Sarasota through Tampa Bay, we have stressed this for days. Get out of there. And Governor DeSantis may make sure you have to with these evacuation orders, which is very smart because it's not safe to stay. This is not something you can ride out, as Stephen mentioned. Our Fox model is showing you right now that through early tomorrow morning, these wind gusts are going to be anywhere from 50 to about 70 miles an hour through Arcadia down to Naples. And then we're going to get up in the 80-mile-an-hour area here, Stephen, in Fort Myers. So you couple that with the storm surge and the winds, you are in a bad situation. There's no other way to put it.
So true. And as Hurricane Ian bears down on Florida, the state's emergency officials are watching the storm very carefully. Fox Weather's Mitty Hicks joins us live from the state's EOC headquarters. This is in the capital, Tallahassee, with a look at how officials are and what they're doing to keep these leaders across the state informed. Of course, we know many people mobilized as Hurricane Ian makes that approach. Good afternoon, Mitty.
Hey, good afternoon, Stephen. And you know, just because we are 200 miles north of where we are expecting Hurricane Ian to make the biggest impact, I can tell you that both state and local officials are telling people along the peninsula, do not take this lightly. Don't let your guard down. Now, look, I'm from New Orleans, okay? So here at the EOC, I can tell you this is just a big gumbo of people from federal and the state here. We see FEMA here, the American Red Cross, the Coast Guard is here as well. And really what they're doing is they're watching the conditions across the Sunshine State. As far as Tallahassee goes, Stephen, I can tell you this is a place where people are evacuating. This is an area where a lot of folks are staging. Take a listen.
We're a staging area for a lot of the state. The Red Cross is here. There's a lot of utility trucks. There's insurance adjusters. So we are, as they are kind of waiting to see as they move further south into the peninsula.
Now, Stephen, again, just because we're 200 miles north of Tampa, again, where we are anticipating of seeing those the biggest impact of Hurricane Ida, I can tell you that leaders and officials here are telling people, again, not to let your guard down because we are still well within that tropical weather threat that we could see severe wind gusts. We can also see a serious amount of rainfall. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this and you have loved ones in the area, you want to make sure they have those hurricane kits ready to go. Live in Tallahassee, back to you.
Yeah, stay safe there. Going to see some rain even up in Tallahassee, but those mandatory evacuations still in effect, Katie, for Western Florida. In fact, as we get to some breaking news, we've been following those evacuation orders. And one thing to note, people are listening.
Oh,
The
yeah.
concerning thing, though, is that time is running out as we could see some of these effects. I mean, we're already seeing them through Miami, but the strong winds as we head maybe into the evening and overnight tonight. Traffic on Interstate 4, bumper to bumper as Floridians move away from Hurricane Ian's path.
And this is not a surprise. On a normal day, I-4 is backed up bumper to bumper, but imagine trying to evacuate. And that's why joining us on the phone is Peter Truslow. Peter, you have been stuck in traffic on I-4 near St. Petersburg. Oh, I cannot imagine how you must be feeling. Tell us what you're feeling right now. And I mean, we know I-4 is a mess on a normal day. When do you think you might kind of start moving?
Well, it's going very slowly, but it's orderly, and I'm just east of Tampa near a town called Plant City, and I'm heading towards the East Coast to get better shelter.
And talking about just your situation, what led you to decide to evacuate? And also tell us around about where you live. Are you from Tampa, or do you live over in Pinellas County?
I live in St. Petersburg, almost downtown, so I'm right on Tampa Bay, and as you've been describing, Tampa is very low, and this time of year we can get water in the streets on a sunny day. So I realized that the storm surge would be really scary if the storm comes in the wrong way.
Well, my next question for you would be that I just want to keep it real here. Are people acting accordingly on the roads, or are they getting impatient? And with that being said, you already have so much on your mind with the evacuations. Were you able to get all the supplies you needed just to get out of Florida the best you can?
Yes, it seems quite orderly. I'm going about 12 miles an hour on I-4 heading northwest, northeast, and you know, we've had a lot of warnings about this storm, and Floridians are pretty experienced at this. We seem to move every time in late summer or early fall.
And really, the Tampa Bay area, one of the most prone when it comes to storm surge. It was fascinating, Peter, to hear just on a sunny day, you can deal with a little bit of flooding. Did you do anything to your home, perhaps boarding up, putting some sandbags down in hopes that maybe your home will be spared if that storm surge does move into the bay?
We did a little bit. I'm fortunate. We live in a pretty new home that's higher than the other homes in downtown St. Petersburg. You know, it's an older Florida city, so there's a lot of low-lying areas, and the new homes have much higher, you know, hurricane ratings and required elevation. So I just sort of boarded up a little bit, and you know, I pray for the best.
You know, one thing Governor DeSantis said, Peter, I'm sure you heard this, and Stephen, you too, they're suspending a lot of the tolls. And I do think that's a very good thing as you evacuate, to suspend the tolls. It's going to make it easier on a lot of families and whatnot. Peter, my question is this, and it may be kind of a dumb question, but are the express lanes pretty packed? Or are people taking advantage of that? Or are they staying on the main roadway? Maybe that would help the traffic jam.
Well, Tampa has had a lot of building on all the causeways and the bridges that go from Tampa to St. Pete, and there are tolls on those, and you know, people are just going any which way to get off, so it's been pretty orderly, but it really helps a lot. And in some of the new roads, I took the Gandy Bridge over, which is kind of really a new roadway, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Well, Peter, I do hope that you've got that gas. Hopefully that tank has been filled up. I mean, going 12 miles an hour on a major interstate through Florida. What a slow crawl that is. We wish you the best. Appreciate you joining us this afternoon on Fox Weather. Stay safe out there. I mean, when it comes to what Tampa could see, it's good that people are listening.
You'd rather them get out at 12 miles an hour, taking their time, and get out of there. You cannot. And I love Peter's patience. He was such a patient guy, and I hope everybody on the roads keeps that attitude up.
Yeah, certainly the thing, because time is running out. In fact, as we're watching Hurricane Ian, we got to watch, Katie, where this storm moves, because that landfall, as we're expecting, could be as we head into the next 24 hours. I mean, maybe we'll wait to see that eye move over the western coast of Florida until Thursday. But the heavy rain has already begun, and that's going to continue to remain a threat. We've had a couple of tornado warnings in southern Florida, Miami-Dade County, more rural, but that moisture is just feeding in. I mean, this is a response to essentially untapped Gulf water for the Atlantic hurricane season. We've not seen a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico until today, as it's now emerged over the northern shores of Cuba. Very heavy rain, and those rain bands, as we're hearing from the Weather Prediction Center, the WPC, might result in some of that urban flash flooding. That's going to be the threat from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Fort Myers, and eventually up into Tampa, where right now on I-4, things are generally dry, but that might not be lasting that much longer. Boca Raton into West Palm Beach. These are the Atlantic-facing beaches of Florida. No one on the peninsula is going to go unscathed by Hurricane Ian. We're going to see, unfortunately, these bands continue to push in and stream off to the north. One of the healthier bands that we're watching moving out of the Keys now, and we had briefly that tornado warning. It expired at about 2:45, and so we've seen that dropped, but that's going to be a heavy band. In fact, there are some indications just offshore. Yeah, we're talking 5 to 8 inches. That is purely tropical rains, and this is still quite a ways away from the center of Hurricane Ian. We're also looking at velocity, because throughout the course of this event, that tornado threat's going to remain a pretty large one. A tornado watch remains in effect for this part of Florida until 5 o'clock. And we're generally getting that rotation. This is very broad, likely not a tornado, but certainly if it's over water, a little easier for those water spouts to form. And as these bands move on in, as quickly as they move in, they do move out. Now, once the forward motion of Hurricane Ian slows, that's going to change, because we'll get that training of these rain bands that push on through. This is just one of many bands we're watching. Here's that tornado watch that we have, which remains in effect, as I said, until 5 o'clock from coast to coast. And then our Fox model showing you, of course, Ian emerging into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, just off Tampa Bay, perhaps making that landfall somewhere between Tampa and Fort Myers. You don't want to ever get caught up in one model run of one particular model, and that includes our Fox model, but indications here show that landfall could occur, a major hurricane too. Some changes have been made since just 24 hours ago. Flood watches, those remain in effect, Katie, until a Friday evening, and that extends for the entire peninsula. This rain could be historic in some spots.
Yes, it could.
No clear evidence of that, but when we're looking at some of these totals, 20, even 30 inches in isolated areas, that's going to do some damage too.
It is. Now, listen, I just got a Twitter message from somebody that's watching us right now. It's great. His name's John, and he asked, hey, when do you think the airports could reopen? I think right now that's not a definite answer we can give. We don't know quite how much rain's going to come in, Stephen, but with that dangerous storm surge and that flood watch, it could be some time. So, I think that's the best answer we can give everybody. We can't answer everything blatantly right out, but we can give you the information we know and what's causing the airports to shut down and why, all right? So take a look at this. You can see the satellite here churning up, and as it does, we're certainly going to start to see more problems as we approach Fort Myers into Tampa, even further south. So not a good thing at all. Don't have to tell you that. I know that's obvious, but I know many of you probably have your head in your hands like, oh, my property in this area. Property can be replaced. You can't.
What are you doing?
So please do as you're told and evacuate.
You can just go
do
to
as
the
you
front
think you
door.
should do and evacuate. We just talked to that amazing person on the phone that had such patience on I-4. I-4 is just a tough road, but you take that tough road, you stay safe, you and your family will be better for it. All right, so what I'm looking at right now are these storm surge watches and these storm surge warnings from Cedar Key all the way down to Homestead. That's where the particular warnings are. And then, you think, okay, this thing's going to hit the West Coast. Guess what? East Coast is going to be affected as well, from Jacksonville Point south and even north. But let me explain to you storm surge, because I know, and that's okay. Many of you are like, how does it occur? What does it mean? What happens? You've got the average high tide, okay? But with the storm surge, you have these really strong onshore winds that push up. So you see the damage. I mean, with the high tide coupled with that storm surge, up to 10 feet is what we're projecting to happen in Fort Myers. Well, y'all, your house and your vehicles, they're going to be underwater, and I don't want you to be underwater, so please evacuate. That's your look at what a storm surge is. Your peak storm surge goes from Port St. Joe with up to about 3 feet all the way down here to Bonita Springs, down toward Naples, 9 to 10 feet. We'll be right back with much more right after this.
With Verizon, you can now get a private 5G network, so you can do more than connect your business. You can make it even smarter. Now ports can know where every piece of cargo is and where it's going.
Right on time.
Robots can predict breakdowns and order their own replacement parts.
Nice work.
And retailers can get ahead of the fashion trend of the day with a new line tomorrow. With a Verizon private 5G network, you can get more agility and security, giving you more control of your business. We call this enterprise intelligence
You'll
from the
see.
network America relies on.
IP4 and your router's
You're a
address.
CIO in 2022. So what's on the agenda? Threat briefings, IT meetings, and lots of coffee. With fully integrated security solutions all in one place. You're ready. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
My doctor requires no insurance.
Okay, so that's
No
right. So that's what I put into the software.
I get to see her as many times as I want.
One flat fee, no surprise bills, no copays, $149 a month. Ford membership includes unlimited doctor's visits because our goal is to keep you healthy and not to bill you for services when you get sick. Get better health care for less. Learn more about Ford's all-inclusive health care at goforward.com.
I ended up losing my job because of COVID. My biggest stress, I think, was not knowing how I was going to be able to afford my medication. I went to the pharmacist and I asked her if there was anything that she could help me with, and she's like, I already got it. Don't worry about it. Here's GoodRx. It was a huge chunk of change, like a good 75% that I ended up saving. I was like jumping up and down. Yeah! I just couldn't be more grateful.
Oh my gosh, you look great. Thanks to you, I lost 22 pounds. And I lost 40 pounds by signing up with Jenny Craig.
Max Up is Jenny's most effective program ever.
I struggled to lose my baby weight and my
Floridians are going to experience the impacts from this storm for a very long time. I can tell you that our biggest concern as we wait for this storm to make landfall is storm surge.
That was FEMA's administrator at the White House earlier outlining the federal government's response to Hurricane Ian. A dangerous storm surge will likely impact the Florida Keys, and I want to break it down for you city by city as we get into this. Again, we are waiting to see where this particular storm makes landfall, but we know that a lot of Florida, regardless of where that makes landfall, is going to see impacts from this particular storm. And it's not good, and evacuation orders have been put in place, and it's something we're paying close attention to here at Fox Weather. You should download the Fox Weather app, and I'm not just plugging our app, believe me, I'm not. You want to do it because you can stay informed whether you're on the go, in the car evacuating, or sitting in front of your TV at home. It's the beauty of a streaming service, all right? So take a look right here. Let's show you Marathon, Florida. We're at 82 degrees, and yes, it is raining, and it's quite windy at 29 miles an hour right now, okay? So as we continue to look, here's your hurricane preparedness. Now, I want you to be ready, okay? You've got little time to be ready before this storm at this point. We've been warning you for days, and I know many of you are doing the right things, but you got to do it if you haven't. Know your zone. Go to floridadisaster.org to find out your zone, okay? You can find out if you live or work in a hurricane evacuation zone, and if you do, get out. It's that simple. Make a plan. Have a predetermined emergency plan tailored to your family's needs, not just your human family, but your pets too. Your medications, your baby supplies, anything you might need. I want you to be comfortable through this. That's what we care about here at Fox Weather. Build a kit. Speaking of being comfortable, build that emergency kit that can sustain you and your family for 3 to 5 days. I know it's difficult right now. Believe me, I've talked to some of my own family who says in Orlando they're having a hard time finding water, gas, and of course can't find generators anywhere. That's Central Florida. So if Central Florida is that bad, think about like Tampa, you know, Bonita Springs, Fort Myers, Sarasota, those areas, you gotta get out of there. And you wanna stay informed. And again, the best way to stay informed is to download the Fox Weather app, because we will inform you second by second as to what's going on. Key West over the next 24 hours, it is just nasty, Stephen. Nothing but rain and storms, and it's no shock because, hello, we are tracking Ian, and this is what Ian brings.
Yeah, and in Key West, that might not even be the worst of it, as we're dealing, unfortunately, with snarled traffic. This is traffic in Tampa this afternoon, with FDOT showing just how slow we're dealing with it on that slow go. No matter which road, you have to just be patient with what you have going on. Also, from the skies, we know that Tampa has at least international suspended operations to prepare for Hurricane Ian. Florida, also, as you heard Katie mention, suspending those tolls in affected areas. So some of those faster roadways, they're certainly not on the faster side this afternoon, but the tolls not going to count against you. So yeah, you got to just expect those delays. I wanted to zoom in, and I appreciate Seth doing this, because a little closer, this is Old Tampa Bay. This is north of downtown. Here's Tampa Bay International. One of the creeks that spills into Old Tampa Bay is the Fish Creek. We could see a little bit of rise along the Fish Creek, and you can see even perhaps a part of the airport dealing with, this would be the worst case scenario with the storm surge. 3, maybe up to 6 foot. That is significant, especially when you're talking about an international airport in a city such as Tampa. It's the largest city that could deal with direct effects of Hurricane Ian. That's incredible. This is one of the runways. And when you look on this interactive map of what we could potentially be dealing with, worst case scenario set, that is incredible to see. So operations suspended, understandably so, as Tampa Bay in general going to, unfortunately, maybe deal with some significant storm surge. As far as those flights, we know as these airports in
Well, you don't need to drive anywhere else now, so
down, but we do have
you don't
some
need it.
that are in that direct path of Hurricane Ian. Speaking of, check out those waves this afternoon. A live look in Key West as Hurricane Ian continues to strengthen. Much more straight ahead.
Who's on it with Jardians?
Free. Jump. We're the ones getting it done.
No doors have been open except for when Mima just came in. Check outside because they just came in the door lane.
Number of people who are on it with the once daily pill, Jardians. Jardians not only lowers A1C, it goes beyond to reduce the risk of cardiovascular death for adults with type 2 diabetes and known heart disease. And Jardians may help you lose some weight.
Jardians may cause serious side effects, including ketoacidosis that may be fatal, dehydration that can lead to sudden worsening of kidney function, and genital yeast or urinary tract infections. A rare life-threatening bacterial infection in the skin of the perineum could occur. Stop taking Jardians and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this infection, ketoacidosis, or an allergic reaction. And don't take it if you're on dialysis. Taking Jardians with a sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar.
A once daily pill that goes beyond lowering A1C?
We're on it. We're on it. We're on it with Jardians.
Ask your doctor about Jardians.
With Verizon, you can now get a private 5G network, so you can do more than connect your business. You can make it even smarter. Now ports can know where every piece of cargo is and where it's going.
Right on time.
Robots can predict breakdowns and order their own replacement parts.
Nice work.
And retailers can get ahead of the fashion trend of the day with a new line tomorrow. With a Verizon private 5G network, you can get more agility and security, giving you more control of your business. We call this enterprise intelligence, from the network America relies on.
My doctor requires no insurance.
No copay.
And I get to see her as many times as I want.
One flat fee, no surprise bills, no copays, $149 a month. Ford membership includes unlimited doctor's visits because our goal is to keep you healthy and not to bill you for services when you get sick. Get better healthcare for less. Learn more about Ford's all-inclusive healthcare at GoForward.com.
We are approaching 3 o'clock on the East Coast, still tracking Hurricane Ian as we are watching that strengthening, unfortunate hurricane in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. A landfall could come as early as tomorrow. And our coverage continues here on Fox. We were looking at that storm surge potential. This was through Tampa Bay, and it could be a significant surge and one that we got to watch carefully. We just received that new advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and that shows evidence of a strengthening Hurricane Ian. So the storm surge is still a possibility. In fact, a pretty big threat in Tampa. A direct hit of Tampa with Hurricane Ian on the table as well. Just check out this hurricane as we have that clearly defined eye. This is a major hurricane, Category 3, expected to get to Cat 4 status, and that's how we start the top of the hour right here on Fox Weather. Hurricane Ian in the Gulf and beginning its approach to Florida. This is some of the damage and the video already caused in Del Rio, Cuba, ripping off roofs as Ian approaches Florida. Those mandatory evacuations underway for over 300,000 people in Tampa Bay. Those staying are boarding up and loading up on sandbags.
I was like, I'm leaving. I'm like, bye. Like, I found a flight, got the last seat on the plane.
People are nervous. They can't find, my nephew couldn't find plywood. The stores shelves are totally empty.
We're all pretty level-headed about it as far as just watching it day by day. We know it can turn at any second and take a different direction.
The time is ticking all day. We've seen communities start to board up those homes and businesses like here in Tampa Bay and Clearwater. By the looks of Hurricane Ian, we could still see some strengthening too as those warm Gulf of Mexico waters are now fueling this storm and those effects of Hurricane Ian being felt quite a distance. Welcome into Fox Weather this afternoon. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Katie Garner. You know, you mentioned the slowness this storm could provide. That would just mean, you know, worse flooding that could come into certain areas. It's all not all unknown at this point, but fairly unknown as to who could see the most storm surge and the most flooding.
I think the most concerning thing too, especially when we look at this projected path, is the slow movement of Hurricane Ian. While there's not a lot to steer it, a lot can be done with that center of circulation, and that's what we got to watch very carefully, Ian, of course, or Katie, watching Ian all afternoon long. We're going to continue to do so. You can see it from space. Of course, seeing these images, it's incredible to watch this powerful thing produced by Earth, and unfortunately, occasionally we have those impacts to